How's it going? All right.
Good morning.
Juliet, how are you?
Actually, it feels like such an opportunity now to get some of these stories told. So I saw you for the first time on stage. One of the things that really struck me, you told the story of the seatbelt story, which I now try and retell, but probably very badly time and time again. So can you just tell us the story of the seatbelt? Because it was just, for me, it just struck such a nerve. It's like, yeah, of course, this is why this is so important. And STEMettes as an organisation is so important.
So this is the idea or the reality that when we moved from horses to cars, engineers were tasked with keeping car users safe in these rather fast vehicles, rather fast metal boxes that they were sat on at that point rather than in. And these engineers decided, kind of came up with their assumptions. They thought who they imagined would be the main people that would end up using these cars. And so they actually developed seatbelts and airbags based off the average man, because that was who they assumed was going to be using it. They were able to take the height, the weight, the build, the kind of weight distribution of the average man. And so they created these devices. They created seatbelts and airbags, which initial versions ended up killing women and children, because women and children are not the average man.
No.
Which those engineers would have done well to remember. This is actually one of the really big examples from Invisible Women, the book which came out last year by Caroline de Perez. And I love talking about this, as you heard it at Hay, and I still talk about this. In fact, yesterday I did some workshops and I was still talking about this yesterday. And I've had countless people from the car industry come up to me, they're in the audience, and said, do you know, we've got female crash test dummies now. And I say to them, okay, great. Are they just smaller versions of the male test dummies that you have? And they all kind of go quiet and turn around and walk away, because that's where we're at. Because women, funnily enough, also aren't small men. They're just slightly different. So yes, that's the seatbelt story.
I love that story because for me, it just personifies why you need to have a diverse set of thinking to create propositions, products, technology that works for the whole of society rather than excluding part of it. And on that, so can you tell me a bit more about STEMettes?
So STEMettes is a social enterprise. We work with girls and non-binary young people aged from 5 all the way up to 25. And I founded it because, so it was back in 2012, actually. I was working in technology in a role at Big Bang, really loved it, really enjoyed it, and ended up at a conference in the States to kind of talk about what we've been doing, the technology we've been building. And I turned up, and I went because it was a free trip to the States, because why wouldn't you go, I guess, as a young professional, and turned up, and it was 3,500 people at this conference, and all of them were women. And I'd never, ever been in that.
Wow.
In a very female technical space. I'd always been in technical spaces, because that's me, that's what I grew up doing from a really, really, really young age. But I thought, this is interesting. This is something I didn't even know I was missing, and I didn't even realize I was a woman in tech. But there I learned about the issue that we have of underrepresentation of women and quite a few other groups within the tech industry. So when I started STEMettes back in 2013, 13% of those who worked in the UK's STEM industry, STEM being science, technology, engineering and maths, which is the broader kind of umbrella, only 13% of them were women. And when we think about who uses this technology, think about the seatbelt example, all the other ones that we can, you can't have a small portion of society building the technology for everyone. They're missing the perspectives, they're missing even just the types of problems that they should be trying to solve, but also, technical know-how and technical competency doesn't reside on a particular chromosome. So why would that be something that we'd end up having in our industry? And so I started STEMettes to solve that problem.
How have businesses embraced what you're doing? Do you find that they're a really good source of either input or resource going forwards?
Yeah, so with businesses, it's been a fun one, because I think we have a particular MO. And when I first started STEMettes, it was a side project for me. So it was all about volunteering. And I was a volunteer on STEMettes, for example. You know, it was my idea, but, you know, I wasn't being paid to be there. It wasn't a full-time role. And so it actually ended up being that it was initially called actually the STEMettes Project, because it was kind of that first year. It was like, well, other people take up yoga. This is my New Year's resolution. I'm going to give it a go. Who knows what will happen? And so by the end of the year, I was knackered because I was essentially working 2 jobs.
Yeah.
And so I said to a couple of people that had been coming, kind of, I think I'm just going to end it at the end of the year because it's not sustainable for me to do this as is. And it was one of our partners, who is still kind of a long-term partner, that said, no, what do you need to continue this? You know, maybe we can help. And I kind of went and redrafted, as you do. You kind of, pandemic happens, so you have to redraft your business model, or, you know, it was like, okay, cool. Someone said, what do you need? It's like, okay, fine. What do I need for this to be sustainable? And that was a team. That was to build a team of human beings who could organize these events and organize these programs so that I could sleep sometimes. And so, you know, that initial idea of having a partner that was a business that would pay for that person's time to coordinate all the things and do the safeguarding and, you know, everything it takes to put together an event or a program, as well as them then, you know, then getting preference for volunteers or whatever else, the rest of it has ended up being our kind of partnership model that we've had for the last 7 years. And so I think it's still something that we're working out actually, and that we hopefully will launch on our anniversary next year, is, you know, there are lots of different ways to work with businesses, and lots of different types of businesses, and lots of different options for kind of configurations. But being able to say, do you know what, this is how we know it's going to work, and we need to spend our energy wisely in investing in partnerships like this, even though we could do this. We know that this is what's going to help us be sustainable, is a kind of constant balance, constant journey, constant evolution that we're on.
Obviously, the sector I come from, energy sector. I'm part of something called Powerful Women, which has been trying to campaign to get more women into particularly senior leadership roles. But obviously, you need to grow the roles throughout the organisations. Do you see particular challenges in industries like the energy sector, it does feel quite stuck, very engineering heavy? Are you seeing any sort of hopeful lights at the end of the corridor, or the end of the?
I think, and I'm not just saying this because you're here. I think people like you being a visible CEO of an energy company that's not doing it like the others, I think for me gives me hope, just because you've not been overthrown. The company's still going.
Yeah,
20
years.
You're a nice person, you're visible, you turn up when we do the events as well. So I think if there's anything, I do end up talking about you a lot, because I think if there's anything, it's with a lot of the discussions I have with energy companies, it's almost as if they kind of need to see it to believe it.
Right. Okay.
And they're still quite stuck in ways. And so it's kind of it's annoying that everything has to be on your shoulders. It's almost like the Marie Curie of, that's the only female scientist people can name, right? But it's like, well, Juliet's there and they're doing that, and they're not based in London, right? Yeah. Oh, hello. Yeah, they're doing it on the green side. They're being sustainable. And so it's a thing to say, look, it is possible, but it makes it easier to point the finger and say, by not having those women in your leadership team, you are the blocker. The problem is not the women. Yeah, which I think is the conversation I end up having when I do end up in rooms kind of speaking to energy people, is the women aren't the problem, right? They're not the ones that are promoting themselves or choosing not to promote themselves. They're not the ones that are choosing not to be recruited. They're not the ones that are choosing not to be given positions of responsibility. Yes, they might go and give birth sometimes, but that's not really a reason why they shouldn't be on your board or in positions of responsibility. So I think it's definitely been easier having someone local that's here, that's visible, to say, look, you need to be doing better as an industry, and we don't need to be pushing it onto, it's not the women's fault, it's not the women's problem, it's your problem for not being able, you're losing out corporately or profit wise, you're losing out by not having these women there, you're losing out talent wise, but also it's your failing of them not being there, rather than saying, oh, women aren't interested, or we had a woman once that we were going to promote and then she left. And I'm like, yeah, why did she leave? Like, did you exit interview? Did you hear anything she said before she left? Because someone doesn't just up and leave, right? Yeah. And so I think it's been easier. So I think you're the glimmer of hope. Whether the message is getting through enough for people to understand the minutiae of their actions and how, you know, calling someone bossy, or, you know, there's all these small, it's like that death by 1,000 cuts thing of, you know, this is how that adds up to you not having women on your board, or not having women as your CEO, or not having women in the positions, or just how you treat them when they're there.
Obviously, the Black Lives Matters movement gained such momentum, not just in the US, but also in the UK, because it felt like it was timely and people were really going, this isn't okay anymore. From your point of view on diversity and some of these wider issues, do you think we're beginning to win? Do you think people are beginning to hear?
This has always been happening. So someone died in America in a rather gruesome video. Someone called George Floyd died unnecessarily in a rather gruesome video. And people had to watch 9 minutes of someone dying to understand or to see something that had been happening already.
Yeah.
So kind of, I'm constantly speaking, right, and doing interviews, and I think I spent about a month saying, do you know I was black before he got killed?
Yeah.
Like a lot of this stuff was happening already. Whether anyone wanted to believe it is one thing. Whether, you know, I got tired of talking about things was another. But I think it's there's kind of the two sides of being heard and being believed is a nice step forward.
Yeah.
But only if the step immediately after that is a change in behaviour, or change in actions, or change in systems. And I think there was so much effort and so much noise and so much of a volume, I think, on that first step, that even someone like me was apprehensive about, is there going to be any energy left to do the second step, right? So to get the second foot down on the floor next to where the first foot has gone. And I still feel some elements of, you're shocked by what you've heard and what you've finally been able to take in, to the point that then you're scared to then act or do something because of the gravity and the heaviness of what you've just heard.
Yes.
And so that has been my frustration, and I've had to work through it to say, do you know what? Me in particular, someone that's a change maker, someone that's visible, I've got a responsibility to use my platform to then say, okay, here's what we do next. Now that we're all listening, now that we're all up to speed on the 30 or so lives that I've lived as a black woman in the UK in technology, here's what we should now be doing before we kind of switch off. But it's also the why, now that we know, why would we ever go back to, why would that ever be something we now forget? Or something that then becomes hidden. And I think it's been that with the Black Lives Matter, but it's been like that for ages with women in this space, right? There's so many things, so many hidden stories, so many hidden experience, so many people. The attrition has been so large that, you know, these women aren't crazy that they're leaving in their droves. Like, something's happening, and by you minimizing it and not believing them, you have to admit that it's your actions, or it's your norms, or it's systemic. It's that kind of patriarchy plus systemic racism plus systemic whatever other discrimination it is. You have to admit that that's something that's been happening, and that's why we've had it. As much as we need the fresh blood and all the stuff that I do with STEMettes, you know, as an industry, we need to do better so people can stay, so they're not harassed at work, so they're not belittled, so that they are valued, so we don't just assume, oh, they're going to have a baby and not work again. But, you know, they ended up talking about salons and laughing in the House of Commons when they were debating, and it's like, that's not laughable. You know, that's people's livelihood. Some of the hardest working people in this economy are the ones who you're laughing at because they're only doing nails, or, you know, any of the other kind of bits. And this is what we're saying. This is why you need that representation at the top. But you have to value different people, but also allow, you know, being in the cabinet to be something that's attractive, which, you know, the way that they operate.
Yeah, would you want to do it? I wouldn't want to do it.
Exactly. This is it. So I think it's that side, which is a whole nother discussion for a whole nother day. Women in politics.
I know. Sorry, I've diverted off the subject, but it's fascinating. Do you think we're getting somewhere? Do you think we're getting girls to get more excited about STEM generally?
It's going in the right direction, incredibly slowly, but going in the right direction. I think for engineering specifically, what we really need, and I've said this to a number of different rooms, what we really need is an alternate route, or a broadening of the ways to become an engineer. Which, when you look at technology and you look at some of the other places, you know, you could decide tomorrow to do a digital course and end up being a coder if you really wanted to. I don't really necessarily want you specifically to, Juliet, but if anyone else watching this, no, you'd be great, believe me. But if you're basically doing it already. If anyone can pick up and do a digital course online, as you know, Google or whoever it is, and everyone's running these kind of courses. Stanford has their courses open. You know, if you can pick up, Open University does it. You've got Tech Mums that's doing it with mums kind of in the Midlands and beyond. Like, if someone can pick that up and do that, we don't have that for engineering.
Yeah.
Which means that and I believe it is artificially narrowing your pool in a way that doesn't make sense. Like, why is it that everyone that's going to become an engineer has to go through university, has to do those 4 years or 3 years, and that's the only way to become all of these things that we have, you know? And so if you want to become a technician, or if you want to be an apprentice, that's fine, and those are the routes, but it needs to be a broader one where you're able to understand that people have transferable skills. They might have been doing something else and they can still be a good engineer, and whether it's energy or whichever one of the disciplines that they are. So I think there needs to be less elitism and a broadening of that,
really,
and also a broadening of the identity of an engineer, which again, as a technologist, you can be a project manager, you can be this, you can be that, but engineers are it's still very narrow of this is it, and that doesn't help for the fact that you've not only got a skill shortage, but engineering as a discipline is growing as quickly as technology is. When we think about sustainability, when we think about even something like 5G, right, we need a lot of people to be a part of, and even broadband, like all of these things, we need a lot of people to be a part of that rollout. And forcing all of them to come through only 3 doors, it's only going to end in disaster. We won't be able to get people through the doors quickly enough to be able to meet all the projects that we need to be done infrastructure wise. So I think that's what I need to see. And then it means that it's not just the girls that can come into engineering. It means it's the women that can come into engineering. It means it's the non-binary people. It means it's the different types of people are able to come in, knowing that it doesn't mean they're going to be a car mechanic. But that there's lots of other things that they can do as part of it, which I feel like engineering specifically has that issue at the moment.
Yeah, what you do at STEMettes is so important, because I think having diversity in our engineers, in our digital engineers, we're not going to solve these problems unless we have that.
No, they need to be on those teams for the engineers to make the correct solution that doesn't end up killing women and children in its first go.
Exactly. Okay, I think we might leave it there.